the top of the page. The line starts Vagashmis. You see that? 8 Yud Tes, 8 lines down. It starts Vagashmis, and then there's a little comment. It says Ubifrat. You see that, everyone? Okay. So we said that the Shefa comes into Biyah. It comes all the way into the stars and the orbits. It becomes physical. This is a tremendous descent for the Or Ein Sof. Ubifrat. As it further comes down through even greater contractions than just being physical now. Helamos starting concealments and coverings. The sun, the orbits, the grass that they make, that they produce with their shefa, is not opposing God. It's just God in a very hidden state. It's not standing up there and telling you there's no God. But the shefa can come so low that it actually encloses itself into something which is the opposite of God completely. And it's still God. This is like the extreme. We've hit the bottom, right? This is the extreme of how low the Or Ein Sof can go, that it can actually encloak itself into something and be enlivening something and infinity found in something which is standing there in absolute opposition to him. Something which completely forgets about the Creator. The Kamosha Kasuv, Malkol Shekain, Kamosha Kasuv B'Klippa B'Sitra Achra Leimor Li Yeori B'Ani Asisim. And this is sort of like the depths of lowliness, what it says regarding Paro, who represents the king of Mitzrayim. What's the king of Mitzrayim? Melech Mitzrayim is Melech Meitzarim. He's the king of boundaries, right? And which means like the ultimate concealment. And what does he say? The river is mine and I made myself. Right? So he basically completely denied the reality of God's interaction with this world and creating this world every second. And he comes and says, the river's mine, the Nile's mine. It was like their God. And he says, I am independent. Like no one made me. I made myself. I am completely independent. I have no... Remember we talked about in the beginning of the Maimer, the idea of the Dalet that has the Yud on the back. And the whole idea is that you have a bittul and you consider yourself poor in a healthy sense, that you have nothing of your own because you're receiving the divine life force. This is the idea of the connecting to the Yesod above. Right? So this is the whole secret of reality, is that you have to realize that you are in a state of receiving godliness, right? So the second you just cut it off and you say like, I made myself, I'm independent, you're still being enlivened by Hashem. The Or Ein Sof is still making you, but this is the humility and the craziness. What we say, the Or Ein Sof is lamata mata adin tachlis. It goes so low that it even can be found in such an entity like Paro, which is the hefich ha'emes mamish. Paro was saying the opposite of the truth, obviously, but let's look into that deeper. What was the emes? Why did Paro get so excited that the river is mine? Right? What gave him such a hubris? Emes who the V'yivarech Yaakov is Paro, right? If you look in the Chitas and read the Chumash, you'll find that Yaakov was the one who blessed Paro. Is b'Tanchuma, and it's brought in the Midrash Tanchuma, and it's brought in Rashi Bimkomo in a couple parshas ago. And Rashi, when Yaakov comes down to Mitzrayim, Yosef brought him before Paro, and it says he blessed Paro. But Bameh Barcho, what did he bless him with? Does anyone know? Someone knows. Not Yisrael, though, because Yisrael knows all the questions I ask. Who else knows? What did he bless him with?
Oh, the water would rise to him.
Thank you, Yisrael. So the water would rise to his feet, right? Baruch hu sheyale nilos likraso. I didn't mean to put you off there, man. Just on honoring your knowledge. So he blessed him that the yale nilos likraso, that the Nile would rise towards him when he came to it, right? This is what he basically, Yaakov did, was he jingled like the higher realms, and he opened up the channels of Shefa, and he made more divine light come into the Kli that Hashem had sort of intended. Remember, it was a famine. So Hashem had sort of closed the apertures which bring Shefa into the world. Yaakov came and blessed him, and he opened them up. What he doesn't say here, but the Rebbe remarks on in his Maimer on this chapter, which again is fresh in our mind, that there was a unique quality in the Nile River in particular, of all the rivers in the world. There was 4 rivers. They were the main rivers that came out of the Garden of Eden. It says that basically Hashem created a river that came out of Eden, and it watered the garden. So you have Eden, a river coming from Eden to the garden, and that's the Garden of Eden. And then from the garden, it says from there, 4 rivers came out. And these are like the four essential rivers which sort of fed the whole world. Now, it says, in general, in Chassidus, it talks about this idea that this is referring to the different worlds. That the Eden represents Chochmah Vatzilus. The river which comes out of Eden is Bina, which is feeding the Chochmah throughout the whole of Atzilus. And the garden is Malchus. So you have basically one river connecting the top to the bottom, because the idea of the one river is that there's unity in the world of Atzilus. Once it gets to the garden of Atzilus, the garden of Eden, which is the Malchus of Atzilus, it says there the river separates. And that's a metaphor for godly light going into separate kelim and initiating the notion of division and plurality, which is going to be the hallmark of the worlds of Bria, Tzir, and Asiya. So from Gan Eden, right, which is Malchus of Atzilus, the river separates, because now we're going to go into the separated worlds. Atzilus is not a separated world. It's a world of Achdus. Bria is where the worlds separate. So in general, they separate into four, right? This is the idea of what was the Achdus of Atzilus. It was basically Yud K, Vav K shined there in a singularity. And when it comes down into the world of Bria, the Yud goes in one place, the Hey goes into another place, the Vav and the Hey. So that's why you have suddenly four rivers, because the unity of the name, right? It sort of got displaced, and now every letter was like sort of fending for themselves, and the world looked like a plurality. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you? Yeah? In other words, the whole idea of basically how it got from one to many, because God is one. How do we have all these things? At a certain point, Hashem basically allowed his singularity to sort of break up into parts. When was that point? The creation, the world of Bria. How is that indicated in the Torah? The river went from being 1 to 4, right? But the idea is that one of the rivers was more powerful than the others. Because even though the rivers separate into 4 rivers, the one river stayed being the one river, and just 3 other rivers sort of came off of it. So of the 4 rivers that flow into the world, there was one river that was actually the original river that came straight from Eden and it just kept on going into the world. It's like the panemius of all the rivers. And that river was the Nile. And so that's why
Alter says the river Pras. Is it?
the river Pras had a different, the river Pras.
It says that it was the original. That's the original.
The river, what was the Nile? Which one was the river? Was the Nile? Was Pishon? I think Pishon was the Nile. Okay, well, in this place, the Rebbe says it's the Nile. I'm not sure it's necessarily a contradiction. Yeah.
So you're saying that when Bereshit talks about the 4 rivers, it's referring to the Nile turning into four rivers?
Yes. But it wasn't the Nile. The Nile is what one of them gets called after the original river in Ghanim, which doesn't really have a name, just called the river.
But isn't Nile only in Africa? I mean, we're talking about like
Right. So let me explain something, right? Obviously, we're talking about
like
the physical counterparts of something spiritual. So when we talk about the original river, we're not talking about water. We're talking about a river of light, right? Where there's not even any physical matter yet. The world of Bria doesn't have any physical things. So at first, it's just a river of light. It's a metaphor for light, right? When it finally comes down, everything in this world is like a mirror physically of what takes place up there. But so obviously, it's not. It's the Nile River was just sort of holding a placeholder for that spiritual concept. But nonetheless, it was the placeholder, which is why the whole story of the Jews takes place around the Nile. And why the Mitzrayim was considered like this lush garden, because the truth is that it was being blessed by the ultimate river, which fed the Garden of Eden, where every delight and every delicacy and every amazing pleasure could be found. So when Yaakov, the point I'm trying to make, we have to look into this Pras Pishon thing. It's a good question. No, I think I remember what you're saying. So I want to check in the footnotes of the Rebbe's Mimer why. I'm sure that it's the same river. We just have to look into it. I know that it is because he's talking over there about the same Inyan, about Paro. And if you're not mistaken, you were just talking about the mimer that was just regarding the staff of Moshe, right? Yeah, it's about the staff of Moshe. The Mate Elokim. Anyway, we'll look at that up. That's
What parsha is that?
it would have been Parshas Bo, I think. Or no, Parshas. When does the staff come out? I think right away in Parshas Shmos. Yeah, it's Parshas Shmos.
Wait, so you're saying that the Nile was one of the 4 rivers?
So again, to your point, right? Yes, there's sort of 2 different conversations going on over here. One is sort of the spiritual concept of the Nile, and that's the idea that there was one of the rivers that sort of rivers of light that started to feed the world that had like the most godliness in it, and therefore those spiritual worlds were reverberating on a higher level. When it all came sort of physical and everything has to become turned into a physical matter, then there was actually 4 physical rivers, and yes, they're not feeding the whole world. This one's in Africa, this one's in the Euphrates, whatever it is, but they're manifestations of these higher things, right? Just like the moon, for example, in our world is a metaphor for Malchus of Atzilus. But Malchus of Atzilus is feeding like all of existence. The moon is just one moon around our, right? So everything has to sort of contract into some sort of physical model, which is not going to capture everything, but be it as it may. Now that being said, one of the rivers, which was the Nile, was the most spiritually powerful. And again, that's why all the story of the Jewish people happens around that river. Because you know what it says, that there was 288 sparks that fell from the broken world of Tohu. If I'm speaking over your head, I apologize. There's just too much like information to say at one time. But basically, all of like the work of this world is called to come and refine the sparks, right? We have to elevate the world, which is that certain aspects of godliness fell into klippas and shattered. And we're supposed to go around and elevate them. Well, it says that Erev Rav came out with us from Mitzrayim, a mixed multitude, right? It's called the Erev Rav. So the word Erev Rav also means, Erev means like Tyruvis, it means a mixture. Rav is the gematria 202, right? So of the 288 sparks that fell in, which is all of creation, 202 of them fell in Egypt. And we fixed most of the world's problems in that one generation of coming out of Egypt. That's what it means we came out with an Erev Rav, those 202 sparks that had been mixed into the world. That's all the silver and gold that we brought out of Mitzrayim and built the Mishkan with. And we elevated it and like changed the physicality of the world. So from that point on, there was only 86 sparks left for the whole rest of the generations to work with. 86 obviously being Gematria Teva and Elokim. The point is, I'm trying to make here, let's just get back to it because we're running in circles, is that when Yaakov gave Paro this blessing, remember we were saying that Paro sort of denied his connection to the higher worlds and said, I made the river, I made myself. He was denying an unbelievable high level of bracha, because the bracha that Yaakov said that the Nile specifically should rise to your feet was that he was basically plugging him into the delights of God Aid. Not only did he end the famine, he brought a level of shefa into this country, which was like Nile level shefa, which is basically the same level of pleasure and divinity that was found in Gan Eden Mamish. And that's the bracha that he gave to Paro. So when Paro's the river is busy rising to his feet, it's like he was given, like he won the lottery. He was given like all the shefa of all of reality, and he basically said, you know, it's my jet, it's my company, I'm the CEO, there's no more boss, I'm taking over. He cut off the source of the blessing. All right, that's all I wanted to say. Was the Rebbe points out that at length in his mimer the significance of the denial of Paro based on the commensurate with the intensity of the bracha of Yaakov. Okay, in any case, he blessed him that the Nile should rise to his feet. This is basically what he gave him, was he opened the apertures of heaven that they should sort of flow into that area of the world. So Parach, who is the king of boundaries, right? Mitzrayim means boundaries and limitations. Who od kafoi tova, he further denied the goodness that was given to him, and he said, the river is mine and I made myself. In other words, he's busy receiving mamash from the hand, and he's biting the hand as it's happening and saying that it's my hand, right? It's just like an unbelievable denial of the truth. He was in denial, literally. Right? Who hepech ha'emes. That's a well-placed pun. Who hepech ha'emes is the opposite of truth. Asher kamokin yeshnu gam ba'avoda b'kol echad ve'echad b'al yisakim yosh ve'ochos. So he goes right into, unfortunately, you think, who is this crazy part? What a fool. And then he says, basically, this is you. Right? Wow. Because this level of denial can exist not only in the most wicked man in the world, but exists in the avoda of every single one of us. And that's why he's telling us about this, right? But it's not a story time. He's trying to explain that inside of you, there's an aspect of mamish godliness, and he's the one who's animating your Yetzer Hara. Your Yetzer Hara doesn't get there by itself. Even that which opposes God is actually the Or Ein Sof, which is made by God, which is God. And he says, well, let's take a look at how this plays out in each one's avoda. And basically, we're going to divide the Jewish people into two general categories, which is called Bali Asaki, which means businessmen, The Yoshvei Ohel, you guys, those who sit in tents, scholars. The Bali Asakim, let's start with businessmen. It'll take the sting out of the Bali Asakim, the Yoshvei Ohel over here. But the businessmen, how are they in a state of paro? That they're going to deny the shefa of God that's coming into them to that extent. It's that they are in this position of thinking that their strength and the power of their hands made them all this wealth. In other words, they basically say like, I'm the man. That's why I make the big bucks, right? I'm the man. That's why I can be a big tzedakah giver, right? I mean, it's good that the Rebbe encouraged people to put their names on buildings and so forth, because it encourages otherwise basically selfish people to give more tzedakah. In the old days, that was not really considered something like praiseworthy, that you should publicize your mitzvah doing, quite frankly. And there's a whole it wasn't really a thing in Am Yisrael to publicize yourself doing a mitzvah. The Rebbe changed it. The Rebbe wanted to use the shtus for kedusha, and he said, look, we're in a generation, unfortunately, in the golden shores of America, where the zeitgeist, right, which is basically how would you describe that?
Philosophy of the times.
The philosophy of the times, right, is that it's all about publicity, right? Like everybody's got to have their own page. Everyone's going to have their own, their own sort of self-identity and make themselves known all over the world. This was sort of like a new klippa that hit the American shores. The Rebbe said, let's use it for Kedusha. So now he found some obscure quotes that we should publicize mitzvahs, right? And he sort of focused it. He says, there is such an opinion and it's for now. So in other words, now we publicize our mitzvahs. You're going to go do you're going to learn Basi Lgani by heart, tell everybody so that they're going to be encouraged to do it also. But in general, why did I bring this up? Because the idea of having to slap your name on everything, right, is basically comes from the negative aspect of the American way, which is that everyone thinks that they're the boss, that they did it with their own strength, like they're self-aggrandizing, right? Well, it's shtus. Alavai, we can make it into shtus to kedusha, right? Oh, the donating thing, yes. Right, so the businessman who's paro-like is the guy who says, my strength did this for me. In other words, it's really the blessing of Hashem, just like paro, but I'll say, I made the river. The river's mine. Only what's the difference between paro and this guy? Is that this guy's a religious Jew. And he knows and believes that Hashem gives you the power. He knows he sat in the Chassidus class. And he knows that Birchas Hashem hi tashir. He knows that the blessing of Hashem is what makes a person rich, not his own self. He's not an idol worshiper. And not only that, Mazkir Shem Shemayim al Kol Davar V'Davar V'Yisko. He mentions Hashem's name on everything he does. Thank you, I bought this Baruch Hashem. I sold this Baruch Hashem. He's basically like a Baruch Hashemer all day long. He's just like you. Mekom, nevertheless, he's paro. He really, in his mind, thinks that it's all because of him that he made this work. Like the belief in Hashem is sort of like he's stamped his Jewish passport that he's a believer. But when it comes to everyday reality, he's not tapped into the actual shefa that this is coming from Hashem at every second. He's really just sort of like an instrument of God to do this. It has nothing to do with him, except for a shtickle hishtadlus, which quite frankly, if it's coming his way, there's not much he can do to stop it anyway. Rich and poor are sort of determined before you're even born, right? So it's really not you that's doing this, quite frankly, right? It's not. It's mamish God. It's the blessings of Hashem that are coming your way. And yet you can, just like Paro, right? All of a sudden we're getting all this shefa. Yaakov Avinu, I haven't seen him around in a while. The river comes to me. It's an easy mistake, just like we said before about Avodah Zarah. They were busy thanking the sun for doing its job. Before they knew it, they were praying to the sun and asking the sun for the shefa. Because after all, this comes through the sun. So they just lost the connection point. That little yud on the back of the dalit, if you guys remember from those classes, it's like the malchus's connection to the higher realms and the realization of the constant flow from above. It's very easy to forget that, especially when Hashem cloaks the divinity into physicality. He thinks it's because he's so smart that he got there. Therefore, there's an identifying sign on a person like this. How can you know if this is me, right? Because at the time when everything's going well, he's making big bucks and it's all happening for him. Ya'oz ba'abaso. He's going to be all proud of himself. He's going to be see, look what I did. and therefore he feels good when success hits him. Because he's basically proud of his very existence. He's like, I am a genius. I made the weather change. Like, I'm so amazing, I can produce wealth. And because he thinks he did it. His wisdom was what made all the shefa come his way. He went to Harvard, he's got all the degrees on his wall. It's mine. But here's the downside. The opposite is also true. When things aren't going well, he gets all depressed and lowly. And he says, neither of those things are true. You shouldn't be all excited about your greatness when things go well, and you shouldn't be all depressed about how terrible you are when things aren't going well, because it's really just Hashem. Since Hashem's blessing is the one who makes wealth, this is the first teaching of the Torah of Chassidus. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but we have the first Rebbe. His name was the Rebbe Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And I'm not sure what he actually taught first, but in the recorded history, right, of his works, the first Torah that we have of the Baal Shem Tov is Shivisi Hashem Lenegdi Sami, right? That it says, which a lot of people put this quote on the Aron Kodesh. It's a very special quote, which means I place Hashem before me always. But the Baal Shem Tov said the word Shivisi comes from the word Shaveh, which means equal. Which means, how do you know if Hashem is truly before you always? If everything is equal to you. A person could insult you, and a person could praise you, and you're not really going to have an attitude shift over those two things. Because it's not you, right? You realize that you're like Moshe Rabbeinu, you're just like an instrument of Hashem. Right? So it's not you that's doing the good things, and it's not you that's performing all these things that people are going to praise you for. So when someone praises you for it, you don't get all excited that I did something. You're just an instrument of Hashem. And if someone insults you, it's just from Hashem. It's basically, you're not going to fall and all of a sudden get lost, because who are they insulting already? You are connected with the truth that everything is just the Or Ein Sof. Obviously, if you have a shtickle yeshus in you, which most of us do, these things will affect you. But that's what the Rebbe's trying to kind of politely put us in our place. If you're one of those people where when someone insults you, you feel bad about it, and someone praises you, you feel good, you have the paro disease, which means you are thinking that you're in control of the situation, right? If you're like mamish, a true agent of Hashem. I remember there was a story, Rabbi Lou from England went into this Rebbe's Yechidus, and he came with reports from England, how's things going? The Rebbe was up to some heavy duty, changes of custom. He was trying to put people in the streets with the tefillin, and he was making all kinds of noise. Mihu Yehudi. He made this whole shturim, right? Who's a Jew? If your mother's not Jewish, you don't have a kosher conversion, you're not a Jew, which is something we all know and is obvious. But he wanted to make it loud and clear to the world, so that basically all these fake conversions or conservative parties or reforms who are trying to convert their dogs and their cats, they would basically be there would be and primarily because the law of return of Eretz Yisrael, they were letting people in, and they're still doing it, unfortunately, as Jews. If they had one Jewish grandparent, they were saying, well, our standards should be more strict than Hitler, Yimach Shemo. So they were just letting people willy-nilly come in on the law of return who were not Jewish. The Rebbe was screaming about this in all the newspapers, and it was controversial to say the least. People were very upset about it. It was upsetting a lot of people. Anyway, there's this and other types of controversial issues were going on. Rabbi Luke comes with it. He's the head shliach of Bigin. He comes with a report to the Rebbe in Yechidus, because that's his job, is to report what's going on in his portion of the world. So he says to the Rebbe, says, you know what's going on in England? And he came with this unfortunate news that everybody's talking about the Rebbe, and everyone's very disappointed in how and in all these announcements and proclamations that he's making, and it was a lot of negativity, and he was nervous and trepidation coming into the Rebbe to say this, but he had to. So he sort of said the Rebbe this is, he told him this one's saying this one's saying this one's saying this one's saying this. I remember this story because it mamish hits the point over here. It's also on a gem video, and he obviously tells it just right. But he said he looked at the Rebbe, and he's the Rebbe did not hear one thing the guy was saying. He heard him, but he said it just brushed over him like water. There was no sense of disappointment or maybe I'm doing something wrong or someone doesn't like me. He was just smiling, listening, and right back to business. Right? Because he's just there doing Hashem's will. What are you going to say? But you have to be doing Hashem's will. If you're busy stuck with yourself, then you're sort of in the way, and you take up space, so it knocks you over. You're going to get knocked down. If you don't take up any space, you're just a messenger of Hashem. It's like, just like we said before, it's prohibited to take revenge on another Jew. There's 2 negative mitzvahs in the Torah which tell you not to do that. But a Talmud Chacham, we said, if he doesn't have vengeance, like a snake, he can't even call himself a Talmud Chacham. Why is that? Because he's Chachma. He's not him. He's like a bittul entity that does not have like a will of his own. He's Hashem walking through this body, and he knows it. We're all Hashem walking through the body, but he knows it and he's aware of it. Therefore, his vengeance is Hashem's vengeance. He's not able to have a selfish attack on another human being. And the truth is, this is shaykh for every single one. As I said before, this is the first teaching of Hasidus. Bittul, right? And we're all trying to still learn the first lesson because I don't think many of us got it yet. But this is what he says: if someone encourages you and promotes you, or if someone knocks you down, you don't get worked up either way because shneim einam emes. Neither of them are true. Since it's really just the blessing of Hashem that makes you rich, you have to have an equanimity, right, in your soul's feeling. And this is also what we call like bitachon, and just like a life of menuchas hanefesh. You're not, because there's nothing you have to worry about. He's the master of the world. He's not going to take care of business. It's his business anyway. It's not even your business. Okay, so the problem is this guy has a lack. So that's the businessman. What about the Yoshvei Ohel? What about the Torah scholar? How does he have a little paro inside? And this is Mamash, not only a firm Jew, he's sitting in the Mamash, a Torah scholar, right? Even though he learns Torah, he knows it's God's Torah. It's possible that, God forbid, with the power of the Torah itself, he will come along and say something which is the opposite of the Torah. Right? This is like so in other words, again, the chef is coming through him, God's Torah is in his mind, somehow he takes it, manipulates it, makes it his own, and says something opposing Hashem, just like Paro said, the river is mine, I made myself, even though God's busy flowing the shefa into him. It's possible that the person can take the very chef of the Torah and use the Torah, against God, by coming with some psak din, which is against Torah, right? Like, for example, those who were complaining against the Rebbe and saying, why are you making such a big deal about who's a Jew, right? Let it be. People want to kind of join the Jewish people and make us feel comfortable. Remember, we have like a complex. Everybody hates us. They're running around trying to kill us in every generation. These guys want to pretend they're Jews. The Misyadim. Easy does it. Like they're a friend to the Jew. So Rebbe was furious. The Torah was furious about this in the mouth of the Rebbe. And someone's going to come up, or there's another big issues. People were trying to say that it's okay to give away portions of Eretz Yisrael. I don't want to mention any names, but some big old rabbis who people have big pictures on their wall about these people. They were coming along and saying it was rough times. Look, we were in war, okay, and it was the 6-Day War, it was the 73, the Yom Kippur War. People didn't know what to do, except the Torah knows what to do, coming out the mouth of the Rebbe. And now everybody agrees to these opinions. But at that time, it was machloikis. So people were coming with Torah opinions. In other words, they had thousands of followers, and they were leading the way, and they had Torah opinions, which was come to the conclusion you should give away portions of Eretz Yisrael. Something which the Rebbe had to scream about, how it's mamash usher in every possible way to give. It's not yours. God gave it to you, and you're going to give it back. It's literally, Paro was blessed by Yaakov, and you're going to say it's yours. It's not yours to give away. And these were rabbis of the highest caliber doing this. So I'm saying, it can happen to anyone, right? The idea is that you take the shefa and you lose the connection point, you call it your own, and now you can use the Torah to go against the Torah. It's a very, very big Paro level. Unfortunately, we're out of time, my friends. We'll pick it up here tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.